What is going on? Welcome back to Trending Stocks. So that is a wrap for the week. I want to give you an overview of what really affected SoFi and go over everything else you need to know. But first, make sure you guys hit that thumbs up and subscribe. And with that, let's get right to it. So SoFi pulled back a little bit, 1.99%, piggybacking off of the broader market's fear, and that was brought on because of PPI, both on a year-over-year and month-over-month basis. It did come in a little bit higher than the forecast. So 2% versus the forecast of 1.6 and 0.5 versus the 0.1% forecast. So if you take the PPI information, add a little bit of sprinkle of CPI, and this is now where you're getting analysts be like, hold on, we're not going to have rates anytime, or like Fed cuts anytime soon. It's going to be at the end of the year. So that's spooking the broader market. It's kind of funny if you think about it, because when CPI did come out, analysts were like, hold on, that's just a little bit more of an overreaction. Let's cool it a little bit. Feds anticipated this. Then of course, PPI comes out, and now they're panicking. So it's kind of comical if you think about it. Today, there was no actual news from SoFi. After hours, there was a couple SEC filings that did come out, as you can kind of see. So there was a Form 4 and a Form 3 that was submitted. The Form 3 is just more so for information, just shows this 𝗪𝗜𝗡𝗘𝗖𝗧, who is the Chief Risk Officer. So it doesn't show any shares or anything, but I believe that they do have to submit this if they intend on giving them some shares in the foreseeable future. And then over and above that, the Form 4 for Chad, who is the SoFi Bank president, did exercise some of their restricted stock, 51,000 shares, and then they already took off some taxes. So nothing really crazy about this, in my opinion. The only thing that is kind of alarming is the fact that they do still have, as you can kind of see, 1.1 million shares, or I guess options or restricted stock that is going to be converted. And so that is quite a lot. But again, it is what it is. Can't really change that. That was voted on and everything else. One thing I just wanted to bring up, it's not a real crazy reason to go out and buy SoFi, but based on this news about them being the official partner, banking partner for the NBA and NBAG and whatever else. So this individual right here, Jason Tatum, did actually post regarding SoFi. So it's kind of good, shows their integration. And I do feel that anyone associated or fans of Boston is going to kind of gravitate towards SoFi now. So that should really help. And I've played, I believe, Anthony's video. It was 2 days ago, something like that. It was just a 1-minute clip talking on their whole plan and why they really do target sporting events and whatever else. So I think that this is going to be a fairly good thing for several quarters down the line, which should constantly bring in a good amount of members. And that obviously is one of the big driving factors for every other metric behind the scenes. So when it came down to today, though, even though it did show signs that it wanted to break out, it always hit a very strong resistance level. And as I've said, I think I've been saying this exact same thing for the last 3 days, and even more so this last weekend. I did say some expectations for this week. It is going to have a difficult time staying over 850. And guess what? That was the case, and that was linked to options. So I'm going to talk on that because it is very interesting to note that this wall right here was created halfway through the day. Yesterday, there was no wall. They let it freely go up. But of course, it kind of bounced off of another resistance level. But aside from all of that, it's kind of funny to see the manipulation that happens with SoFi. Looking at what shorts did today and all the other fun jazz, they did return about 68,000 shares. 16.65% of the free float is being shorted, and 151.8 million shares overall are being shorted. And that broker is back. So this is now the second consecutive day that there is the cost to borrow minimum being negative. So negative 0.2%. I know it's not all that much, but it does signal that there is some sort of manipulation that is happening behind the scenes. And looking at this chart right here, you can see that shorts didn't start to do all that much until midway through the day. So pretty much at this point, once it bounced off of that, so the technicals were trending down, this is where they started to slowly return shares. Once again, just to ensure that it does stay below 850. So kind of interesting stuff when it comes down to that. Options wise, so $5.27 million in calls being purchased versus 2.1 million in puts. Sentiment wise, a little bit more optimistic. So 58% of all the options being done today are optimistic. So as I've signaled in the past, you can kind of see the open interest, and it gives you a good viewpoint on what big money is really intending on doing. So for instance, looking at the open interest, there was, and it did close with 30,000 in open interest at the $8 strike price. So going into next week, whether it be pre-market or during the trading day on on Tuesday because Monday's a holiday on a side note. So on Tuesday, you are going to see a nice bump up as market makers do cover those options. And last Friday, there was roughly about 19,000. So it is starting to edge up a little bit. But of course, with 33,000 at the 850 strike price and 42,000 at the 9, so market makers didn't want to cover that. So they found it a little bit more advantageous to try to suppress the price below those strike prices, because as it stands with it closing at 838, all of those call options are going to be expired worthless, versus even if it closes at 850 or 851, all of those would have to be covered on the open market. So meaning market makers would have to cover that. So it's kind of an interesting thing to see what happens behind the scenes. And like I've signaled, this next week is free and clear. So essentially, market makers are going to be taking a step back, maybe around the $9 range, but this is where SoFi could potentially have a nice run up going into next week, as market makers don't seem to be having that big of resistance levels. So that's kind of interesting stuff that is happening behind the scenes, and big money has been interested in SoFi for today. And so these are all the transactions that did occur on the secondary market above $100,000. So some pretty big ones: 1.1 million, 1.05, 8.52 million. Based on the bid, the ask, and the selling price, the majority of them that did happen today were buys. There was a lot of activity after hours that did come out that was more so selling, but that might be just, in my opinion, rebalancing, and plus maybe just some reactions to this Form 4, even though it's not all that bad if you think about it. And interestingly enough, I didn't see any update today, but yesterday Cathie Woods did buy 2.8 million shares of SoFi. So big money behind the scenes has definitely been looking at SoFi, but whoever's manipulating it clearly has a little bit more money than those entities, such as Cathie Woods and whoever else is buying. So let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below. But as far as what happened today, with it closing at 838, it did close between this R1 and this R2. So $8.53 is the next strong resistance point, and then vice versa, $8.32 is going to be that next strong support. In fact, it did sell off and touched below this, and luckily enough, this did hold, because if not, then it is going to retrace back into the 7s. But once again, this did hold, bounced off of that, and trended higher. And this is why I actually do really like SoFi. Aside from what they're trying to do operationally, but just looking at their stock moves very simple and logical to the technicals. So if you are good at kind of mapping out what is coming next, you can actually easily do options time and time again. So if you have been doing options, give yourself a shout out in the comments. Or are you just buying long-term calls? Are you like myself that likes to sell either puts or sell covered calls, collect some additional premiums? Like, what's your kind of style? Give yourself a shout out. Have you been buying SoFi? Have you been selling? What have you been doing? Based on the momentum indicator, shows number of retail investors were getting out today. Stochastic, you do see a nice bullish sentiment starting to form, so black line above the red, but it is considered kind of neutral at 45. So that does give a lot of opportunity for SoFi to run up pretty significantly. Once again, you need big money's backing and you don't need any manipulation, but going into next week, it seems to be that market makers are taking a step back, hopefully enough. Let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up and subscribe. I always greatly appreciate that. And one final thing I just wanted to share with you, if you are looking at stepping up your investing game, highly suggest in taking advantage of that 7-day free trial in the description below for Seeking Alpha Premium. I've had quite a few people ask me where I get my information from and everything else. This has everything that you ever need to know. So it has all the press releases, the latest news, transcripts of fireside chats, there's SEC filings, everything that you need. So highly suggest in taking advantage of that 7-day free trial in the description below or the comments. But with all that said, appreciate all of you watching. Hopefully everyone has a good long weekend, and stay tuned for my video, whether it be Sunday or Monday, one of those days, on some expectations for this upcoming week. So hopefully everyone has a good weekend, and with all that said, appreciate all of you watching.